check one, check, sound check one. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to remind everyone to please proceed at the venue area as we are about to start our afternoon session shortly. Once again, to our participants, you may now proceed inside the hall as we are about to start our afternoon session shortly. Thank you.
What kind of cruise space international order do you want in this part of the world?
The cruise space international order is very important because if states don't follow the rules, then nothing happens in international.
As a state of ASEAN, is we're going to continue to make sure that this is the business only to serious interest to attempt to kind of we can make it.
One qualify good option because we can understand the current conditions of the country.
China insisted on the historical rights, and for the ASEAN member states, we insisted on our sovereign rights.
When it comes to interactions of maritime forces among ASEAN member states, were pretty much stable. The threats we face in the Western Sea within the Great South China Sea are much more existential. Talk about seeming contradiction in history and international law. If there is a conflict in history, it's obviously a conflict.
Of target the regional fishery body to support, enhance.
So there is a strong evidence of long-term fish competition.
Just a question. What about qualified?
Aquaculture is to drive Asian fishery supply and non-nuclear industries.
I would like to say that you very much use the question.
If the marine environment is neglected, for example, in fish catch collapses, then you can see incidences of farming that will become the push factors for instability.
The ecosystem do not respect your law. They respect their own law. So these landmark laws for the Philippines strengthens the alignment of its domestic legal framework with international law.
Sirs and ma'ams, you may now proceed to your respective seats as we are about to start our afternoon session in 3 minutes. Once again, you may now proceed to your respective seats as we are about to start our afternoon session in 3 minutes. Thank you. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome back to our afternoon session. So we will now proceed to panel 7. Chairing this panel is Patrick Zoll, correspondent for geopolitics in the Indo-Pacific. Our panelists are Dr. Su Waimon, Research Fellow, Center for International Law, National University of Singapore; Muhammad Wafa Karisma, Researcher, CSIS, Indonesia; and Dr. Big Chan, Non-Resident Fellow, We Protect Our Seas and CSIS. Once again, let's give them a round of applause.
Good afternoon, everybody. So you are the toughest one of the whole crowd. You're here after lunch. Thank you very much for coming. And you might ask yourself, why is there somebody from Switzerland sitting on an ASEAN panel? I'm going to tell you the best kept secret of ASEAN. The S in ASEAN actually stands for Switzerland, and that's why I'm here. No, the real reason is this is a special panel supported by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, CAS from Germany, and they asked me to moderate this panel, which I am happily doing. The topic today is submarine cables, something we all depend on every day, have been depending on for a long time, but probably about 4 years ago, except for a few experts, nobody really paid too much attention what's going on with subsea cables. There were a number of high-profile interruptions of subsea cables which brought it up on the agenda. Some of them were natural, like the interruptions on Tonga, where the whole country of Tonga all of a sudden was cut off from the internet. Or we have some cases of suspected sabotage, like in the Baltic Sea, but also around Taiwan in the last 2 years or so. So today, subsea cables is something which is in the media, maybe not daily, but very, very regularly. And I get the impression every researcher who can writes a paper about subsea cables. So we're going to do this the following way. We start with short introductory remarks of each of our 3 panelists. I'll add 2-3 questions, and we go to questions for the public very, very quickly. So be prepared. Very shortly after the introductory remarks, I will already open up the floor for questions from the floor. So, Sue, please go ahead. You're first.
Hi, thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank WPS and also CAS Philippines for giving me the opportunity to be part of this panel and to participate in this conference. I'm very grateful. So I'm going to start with my introduction for 4 points. I'll cover 4 points. First, why it matters, why cables matters, why do we have to talk about it, and why do we have to protect them? And the second point would be the ASEAN. What is the situation in ASEAN like? Each of our ASEAN countries connected to how many cables, and why cables? Are there any alternatives like satellites? And the third point is vulnerabilities. What are the security threats to this critical infrastructure? And the last point would be what are the legal and law enforcement constraints that we have? And from there, what's next? We'll cover later in the follow-up question. So the first is that, yes, we are now talking about submarine cables. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with cables. Probably we all don't really feel their existence at the moment. But if you ask yourself, if you ask me, can we feel their existence? If we can feel their non-existence, how? You switch off all your mobile data and Wi-Fi, right? So no internet, no communication, no WhatsApp, no video call, no social media. That would be the world without cables. And in fact, we all wouldn't be here all gathered today without submarine cables. Because how many times, right, the organizer communicated with us by using email, sharing documents. And so cables are just nice to have at the beginning, right? We can communicate each other. But now, the security of these cables are really important because now they have turned to critical national infrastructure, which is essential to communication, commerce, national security, energy security for power cables, and also digital economy. So I'm going to highlight these 3 points why national governments really have to give attention to these infrastructure. First is daily communications, emails, social media, WhatsApp, and all the Zoom meetings that we are having today. And next is security, national security, because all our military communication are also passing through these cables. So countries like United States, for example, they have more investment so they can have the separate cables for military communication. But for smaller countries, we may not be able to do that. So all our sensitive security confidential informations are also going through these cables, and most of the cables, majority of them, are managed and owned by private companies. And for economy-wise, approximately US 10 trillion in financial transactions are transmitted daily through these cables. So all our international trade, e-commerce, all our online shopping, without cables, it won't be possible. So for the general public, cables are most of the time, it's out of sight, out of mind. They are very critical, but we don't appreciate them enough. So the next point is how about ASEAN? So at the moment, globally, there are altogether 570 cables in service and with another 81 planned. And so far, this is the highest number of cable systems within the last 2 decades. And we're gonna have more of them. And Singapore in Southeast Asia has the highest number of cables, and they are planning to have over 40 subsea cables by 2028, followed by Malaysia 29, Indonesia from 22 to 23. Based on my research, Philippines has 11 in service international submarine cable systems, and 6 more are under construction. And Vietnam currently has 5, and they're gonna increase to 15 by 2030. And Thailand, Cambodia 2, and Myanmar 3. So the region's growing data demands, ASEAN talks a lot about digital economies. So that would be one of the reasons and push to have more cables for faster data. And also nowadays we are talking about 5G connection, IoT, AI, all requires more bandwidth and internet. So we will have more cables in the future. So why cables but not satellites? Because they are cheaper option, but not that cheap either. Because laying of cables alone costs $500,000 to $5 million per kilometer. So it pretty much depends on the length of the cable. And each cable lifespan is about 25 years minimum, but it could last longer than that. And fixing of cable, if there is a damage to the cable, it will cost $1 to $3 million USD. And what are the vulnerabilities and security threats against the cable? It's mostly fission, accidental damage, fission, and then sometimes shipping and natural disaster. And also, now we also have the new emerging threats, which is cyber attack as well. And what are the risks then if there is a damage to the cable? So for the countries which has less redundancy, not connected to many cables, then the single points of failure, countries with limited cable redundancy are highly vulnerable. So we have an example back in 2013, Somalia incident where a single cable cut caused a 3-week blackout. no internet, and they lost USD 9 million daily economic loss. So unless there is specific intelligence, it is also quite challenging to monitor and to detect the cable damage and also to prevent. So at the moment then, what are the mechanisms, legal mechanisms that we have? Unfortunately, we do not have sufficient or enough legal capabilities at the moment. So UNCLOS gives coastal states to have the national legislation to implement Article 113 of the UNCLOS to criminalize intentional cable damage on the high seas or the exclusive economic zones. But majority of the countries, almost all the countries in the ASEAN, we are not implementing this Article 113 of the UNCLOS. So that's one gap in the legal framework that we have, international legal framework, as well as national domestic law. How about enforcement? Although UNCLOS gave us the rights to legislate, to criminalize intentional damage to the cables, but UNCLOS does not give us rights to take enforcement action like boarding, arresting the vessels which damage the cables beyond territorial sea, which is beyond 12 nautical miles. So these are the gaps that we have, and we have to think about while international communities is working on strengthening the legal framework, what we can do practically at the moment that in context of ASEAN to protect these critical national infrastructures. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Patrick. And good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to CAS Manila for supporting the panel, of course, for We Protect Our Seas, for organizing this really timely and forward-looking dialogue. It is a pleasure to join this important conversation on ASEAN Maritime Security, but particularly to reflect on the growing imperative of protecting submarine cables, an issue that is remained under-discussed, but increasingly central to both national and regional resilience. So if Dr. Yeo said in a panel on misinformation, disinformation, that was one of the most important panel of the conference, this is the backbone of the information sharing that we have, right? Submarine cables, the very infrastructure that we sometimes don't really see. Because it feels like sometimes it's just like roads. We take it for granted because it's always been there for hundreds of years, but it's actually the backbone of so many things that we have today. So to put it simply, submarine cables are the invisible infrastructure underpinning Southeast Asia's digital economy and strategic connectivity. As Sue said, they carry over 99% of international internet traffic. And of course, the value of the transactions and the information that was carried by these cables daily is so huge in the tens of trillions of USD. In ASEAN, their importance is amplified by geography, right? We sit at the heart of some of the world's busiest maritime choke points, the Malacca Strait, right, the Luzon Strait, and the vast areas of the South China Sea, where crucial international cables transit. And these choke points make ASEAN not only a hub, unfortunately, but also a vulnerability point. And I'll take my opening statement to reflect on the position of Indonesia as a developing country, which I think fellow ASEAN member states will also refer to and empathize with. So this geographic reality illustrates both opportunities and risk. Indonesia, as an example, has about 217 regulated submarine cable segments and 186 unregulated segments of submarine cables, which is installed outside of the designated corridors. These segments cater to about 57 cable systems overall, and including 10 upcoming cable plants valued each at some of which around 760 million USD. So it's big projects, and we're excited to be the next hub, but of course the question remains, can we do it? The governance of these critical underwater infrastructure is crucial For Indonesia, if it is to realize its dream of having a digital economy that contributes around 360 billion USD to its GDP by 2030, so big ambition. As mentioned, as crucial as these cables are, the risk of damage has always been there. From accidental damage due to anchors from ships, natural disasters, sabotage and theft, and increasingly, what I'm trying to raise here, point here, it's a potential as a target of geopolitical interference, right? Recent cases, such as the 2023 Taiwan Matsu Island incident. More recently, of course, Taiwan has been looking at the January-February of this year's incident as well, where cable cuts were found, and the Baltic Sea cable disruptions. These incidents have raised in recent years alarm over the potential possible state-sponsored sabotage in high-tension regions. For many analysts, this is not isolated incidents. They reflect a shifting threat environment in which cable infrastructure is becoming both a strategic asset and a potential target. The very difficulty of precisely identifying the cause of damage to these assets give acts of cable cutting a high degree of plausible deniability and make it an ample gray zone tactic. Of course, the risk will be higher for places where there is a low level of redundancy of backup systems, right? And for developing countries like Indonesia, in the context of US-China strategic rivalry, we are facing a delicate balancing act. Both powers are heavily invested in the region's digital infrastructure, not just financially, but also technologically. So Indonesia, for example, is host to multiple major cable projects involving US tech firms like Meta and Google, as well as the old suppliers like Japan and France. But we're also increasingly catering to Chinese-backed projects to help build Indonesia's less connected regions. For example, Indonesia is also heavily dependent on electric components from China. So for example, one data says for our import of optical fiber cables, 73% of our import comes from China. So this raises a strategic dependency type of risk as well. The problem for countries like Indonesia is that cable laying consortia is increasingly reflecting geopolitical alignments, suggesting that the rising securitization of cable can be an issue for countries like Indonesia, who is accessing and catering to two different, great powers, technologies and financing. For countries like Indonesia, our procurement and regulation remains driven by cost efficiency to address digital divide and fulfill potentials, not yet by a long-term strategic risk assessment. And of course, this is mostly due to limited leverage in supplier markets, and often also because of domestic institutional silos, preventing it from reading some of the more strategic considerations. Of course, technological decoupling that impacts the access of developing countries to these cost-effective infrastructure will be a challenge for countries like Indonesia. Finally, in a perfect world, cable remains apolitical and commercially driven, but today mistrust and geopolitical tensions have politicized even the most technical infrastructure. And Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries face this dilemma. Cables are essential, must be delivered quickly, affordably, but at the same time, mistrust means every technological choices will be scrutinized for our strategic alignment. Right? It's an impossible position for developing countries with fewer resources and alternatives. And of course, lastly, if we not be fully prepared, the geopolitical rivalry at sea can escalate into an underwater gray zone arms race. And countries like Indonesia, we still face some, daunting challenge of capacity. In governance, especially with how we try to manage our corridors, mapping, licensing, and of course, in one case, there is no centralized system for repairs, for example, just to mention one example. And so for countries like Indonesia, this shows our current position of strategic non-alignment, while valuable diplomatically, will not shield us from the consequences of unreadiness. So for countries like Indonesia and others in the region, we must be prepared if cables and this type of infrastructures is being increasingly securitized and forces us to limit our choices. So I'll stop at that. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Wafa.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. And many thanks for We Protect Our Seas for this event and also its partners, including CAS Philippines and Whitecaps. So, to begin, I just want to, clarify that, by subsea cables here, I mean fiber optics subsea cables because there are many other types as well. But I focus on the fiber optics that carry internet traffic. And also subsea cables, it's not the only method for internet connection, but like Sue and Wafa said that they carry the vast majority of global internet traffic. So I agree with Sue that the reason why we need to pay attention to subsea cables because they have become critical infrastructure. I just want to, add some examples to demonstrate the heavy and increasing reliance on digital services in every aspect of our life. So, for example, emails are no longer enough. We prefer video calls. And, we used to enjoy video streaming, but now we, aiming toward virtual reality. And, like telehealth, is a recent phenomenon where you can see your doctor online, but now we're moving toward telesurgery, where a surgeon can perform a surgery like remotely. And, in terms of national defense, we used to focus on how to make sure we have a sustainable long-term communication, but now we have, we focus more on real-time information exchange. And, especially in terms of digital economy, according to a report by Google Temasek and Ben on the 6 countries that they cover in their report, their digital economy has experienced dramatic growth in the last almost 10 years. So just to give some perspective, like in 2019, for example, the gross merchandise values of these 6 countries was about 100 billion, and only after 5 years, now the value reached like 263 million. So that's the very dramatic increase in the volume. So because of the increased demand in the digital services, the volume of internet connection traffic has increased exponentially. And any disruption, whether accidentally or intentionally, will have like detrimental and long-reaching impacts.
Thank you very much, Big. I stay with you for a second here. If the leaders of ASEAN come to you and ask you, Big, what should we do to improve the security of submarine cables? And thank you for clarifying that we're talking of data cable mostly. What should we do to improve the security? 1 or 2 points, which one do you see are the most important ones?
I think, for like immediate action, I think we can leverage, the tool for maritime domain awareness for the subsea cable protections. For example, like in different 3 phases of subsea protection, the monitoring, the response, and the planning phases, we can apply different maritime domain awareness tools. For example, in the landing side, we have, camera surveillance, and then, in territorial sea, that, we can have, coastal radar and strategic deployment of submarines in order to deter any sabotage. But, in other, like, deeper water areas, like the exclusive economic zone or the high sea, we can, utilize, satellite images, platforms such as Sea Vision of the United States, or dark vessel detection of Canada, or New Zealand Starboard Maritime Intelligence. Those platforms have the capacity to detect vessels, that intentionally turn off their AIS signals. So because, the subsea cables, is like stretched across long distance. Because of that, I think that depends on the zone we need to apply different MDA tools. So that's one thing. But in the longer term, I think countries need to develop a comprehensive framework that include international cooperation because that involve many countries. And then within each country, I think they need to coordinate between different agencies to have better understanding of their responsibilities and how to respond quickly in terms of accident. And other than that, I think public-private partnership is also very important because the one who lays the cable and running the operation actually is the private companies. So they need to work together.
So you already have 3 points: maritime domain awareness, a framework for international cooperation, and public-private partnerships. Wafa, do you see anything?
And interagency as well within each country. Yep.
Yes. Wafa, what would you add to that already quite long list?
Yeah, I think I'll follow up on that. I think a lot of the heavy work will be at the national level because countries who depends a lot on these subsea cables, especially for international internet connectivity, first thing they have to do is expand cable corridors. So lay more cables, more redundancy, the better. And so that when one or two cables get cut, you still have other cables to rely on. Secondly, and this is a problem probably not just in Indonesia, is to streamline governance so that we can have a quicker mechanisms, not just to in the application of the laying of the cable, but for the repair of the cable, right? And governance is not just about process, but also about readiness. Like I said earlier, in the Indonesia case, there's many reports of how small the fleets, Indonesian flag fleets are for conducting repairs, right? Reported there's only 4 Indonesian flag vessels to cover the whole archipelago, and it'll take 2 months, especially, and the bad scenario would be two cables breaking around the same time, and in two completely different areas of Indonesia, and it'll take so long to finish this one and then to go to the other one. So average is probably more than 1 month or even 2 months for Indonesia, one of the slowest in Southeast Asia, right? So the quicker the repair is, the better. And for that, I think some regional initiatives can be done as well, right? I do know that Indonesia just established a new national team on subsea cable management. So we have a focal point. If we can have a forum of some type at the ASEAN level to coordinate different focal points, different national teams, so that repair issues, especially in the EEZ or something, right, can get quicker response time, and that it doesn't have to really go through all the bureaucratic red tapes if these forums gets established. So I'm really thinking about, this is of course a wishful thinking at this moment, but like an AHA center for cable disaster, right? A coordinating body, ideally. But at this moment, probably some sort of forum to coordinate the different national teams of different ASEAN member states would be nice.
Sue, you have something to add? The list is getting longer and longer.
Thank you very much. I would just add, because Big and Wafa quite cover enough already, but I would like to add based on their points. So if you first, the national governments of ASEAN, or I would start with general maritime security, having a systematic national policy on maritime security strategy or maritime security policy. Some of the, or maybe most of the countries might be lacking that. Why it is important to have this systematic national policy is we want to know what are our priorities, what are our national priorities to protect our national interests. So I always say this whenever I have an opportunity to speak. Before we talk about international cooperations or regional, before we go for external, it's very important to do our homework, which is a lot for us. We need to do our homework. What are our national priorities? What are our national interests? So that it's easier for us when we talk to external partners to cooperate, to identify the areas that this is the area we want to be better equipped with, we want to be better with. So could you help us with that, even in terms of capacity building, for example? So that's very important, having a systematic policy. And talking about submarine cables, we need to identify them as critical national infrastructure in the policy itself. So some of the countries already identify what are their critical national information infrastructure, but submarine cables are not expressly mentioned as critical national infrastructure. So if we could identify cables as the critical national infrastructure, then maybe it could be the priorities, then follow up by the actions to protect them. First, we have to adopt national laws. We have to implement the Article 113 of the UNCLOS by criminalizing intentional damage to the cables. And talking about private-public partnership, why it is required, I would like to add a little bit more. Because UNCLOS gave the right states to lay cables, but states are not laying the cables. Private companies are laying the cable. And cable is pretty much private. All cable industry is majority controlled by private sector and private companies, cable owners and cable companies. So when they come and lay the cables in our waters, whether territorial sea or exclusive economic zones, we need to communicate each other between the regulators, the coastal states, and the cable laying companies, because there is a mutual interest. Because for the other countries, they can lay the cables in our exclusive economic zone, for example, and at the same time, coastal states are also has the rights to protect our national interests, because there are competing interests, growing competing interests today in the exclusive economic zone, because coastal states, we have wind farms, oil and gas facilities or installations, and we have marine protected areas, and also any other activities that coastal states may have. So we need to communicate the cable laying companies that, look, these are the areas that you have to be cautious about, because it all may be the area which there are many fishing vessels or fishing grounds. So there are very likely that cable damage could happen because of the fishing activities. So there is a mutual interest for both private companies, cable laying companies, and the coastal state. They need to communicate each other, and they have to do it earlier, prior to the cable laying process. So also, just to add one more point, that it is also very important at the national level for policymakers, when they give the licensing and permits to the cable companies, it is very important to, in order to do that, when they communicate with the private companies, they need to have a proper information. Maybe if only one agency is giving permits or license to the companies, they may not be aware of fishing activities or energy facilities in the exclusive economic zone. So it is very important that at the national level, we need to have a coordinating agency or the interagency committee, which involve representatives from each agencies, and they should have the meeting that, so that they are aware of what's happening in our EEZ, so that we can give the information to the cable companies. So, so thank you.
I would like to look for a moment at sabotage events. As far as I understand, here in Southeast Asia, at least none of the countries here have claimed major sabotage. We've had several in the Baltic Sea, we had around Taiwan, and we see responses in these areas. We see in the Baltic states NATO actually has a dedicated naval mission now, trying to be present to deter action. Taiwan has a blacklist of ships which they find particularly suspicious and they want to keep an eye on. Have you seen so far in these approaches anywhere else in the world ideas which you think would be very good to adapt here or easily to adapt here? Who would like to take? Vic, you want to try to take a shot?
Yeah, so I think that, like Sue said earlier, if the countries in the region recognize that subsea cables are critical infrastructure, then they will, for example, deploy Navy vessel or Coast Guard vessel for, monitoring, right? So I think the European Union, some countries are doing that, including Italy. So they actually send Navy vessel to patrol along the subsea cable lines. So I think that is a practice that we can adapt because Navy and Coast Guard vessel do patrol every day anyway. So focus more on the water above the subsea cable is also easily to add. Yeah, and countries in the region, including Vietnam, is already using Sea Vision platform. So, instead of just tracking vessel in general, they can, focus on the vessel that near the subsea cables area. And if you can, for example, if the vessel moving zigzag like this, it's like very unusual, right? So if they can detect that and send alert to the relevant authorities, then that would be great.
So Wafa, I think you brought up the point that it's even within states, they have to get their different agencies on the same, and a big country like Indonesia, you have a lot of domestic subsea cables. How optimistic are you that on the international level, on the ASEAN level, the coordination can get good enough? Let's say a ship breaks a cable in one country's territorial waters and goes into somebody else's territorial waters, that they could actually work together and pursue somebody like that. Are you positive that the coordination could be close enough?
I think the early work must be done, right? So we have recently we have the 2019 guidelines on subsea cable, and then last year we have the Singapore Declaration, both of which are trying to more streamline the governance of repair, especially, right, and to have a quicker time and to open and agree for information sharing. And these are between, especially in the case of Singapore Declaration, these are between the digital ministers, right? And so this is the previous deal of the digital ministers. But I think we need not just in that forum between the ministers of telecommunications, but also involving other stakeholders. For example, in Indonesia, the issue of subsea cable is tackled in the different ministries. The fishery ministries is the ones that's laying the corridors, the mapping, right? And then the Minister of Transportation is the one that has to, ensure that the zones, are actually for the purpose of, laying subsea cables. We've got, of course, Bakamla is here, Indonesia Coast Guard, and the Navy and the Ministry of Defense is in charge of the security and will help out in some of these processes. So different stakeholders, and I think it must be tackled not just between digital ministers, right? One of the barrier is that because we don't have the crisis yet, we don't have the incident yet, between ASEAN countries, there will be different sort of threat perception. Because on one hand, we don't want to over-securitize before the risk is here, right? Because that would hurt our, especially if we pinpoint specific incidents of a specific countries. Usually, they're quite reluctant, right? Some countries will be quite reluctant for that. On the other hand, preparedness is still the main point, right? So we need to be more prepared, right? So I think the answer lies with Dick's earlier statement on maritime domain awareness. The more we know, the more we can identify. I think that's the better way to have a more national capacity to detect and to be more aware. And therefore, at the regional level, there'll be a lot more impetus. The good thing is that it's still early. So usually in ASEAN, if the issue is early, it's not here yet, right? The norm building is much easier than the more traditional sensitive, issues. So we can sort of start the workshops or trainings and all the seminars now, which is a good thing. This panel, is here.
Thank you. I see some of the first name tags have been going up on this side. I'm going to take one question after the other and not lump them together. And if I don't address you by name, I find it a bit hard to read sometimes. Please go ahead. Yes.
Yes. So my question is about the cable repair ship. Because the fact that we only have 22 actively operating cable repair ship, but given that on average every week there is 2 or 4 cable, subsea cables being damaged. So given that in Southeast Asia region we are having so many subsea cable lines, wouldn't it be ideal for Southeast Asian countries to jointly invest in the shipbuilding industry so that we can have our own cable repair ship? Because those ships are very different from the cable laying ship. So in a way, my specific question to Dr. Su is whether International Maritime Organization would have some legal framework to allow for what you mentioned just now, the public-private partnership in jointly managing such risks. And to WAFA and also BIG, I wonder if Indonesia and Vietnam have any specific approaches to the maintenance of a subsea cable in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chu. Right. I think your suggestions about whether ASEAN countries should jointly invest in having more cable repair ships, that would be great initiative. That would be really, if so, we would like to also suggest maybe we'll have more questions if I have an opportunity what ASEAN should do later. So those 2 suggestions could be one of it. And that's also very important, the repair capability. And then your next question about whether IMO could do something about it. So IMO is International Maritime Organization, which particularly deals with shipping. So, there was some submission by the countries that to protect the cables by shipping activities to the IMO. So for this, IMO would be responsible, or maybe in the future taking more initiative to protect cables from shipping activities. But we have another committee, or IPC, International Cable Protection Commission. So this is the main agency where the cable owners and some of the governments also involved as the party or the members, but majority is from the industry. So I would also like to suggest that national government should involve more with ICPC, but this organization does not have the regulatory roles. So IMO is only for shipping, but for your suggestions, I think ASEAN has to take its own initiative. Thank you.
So probably just to, I don't want to intrude your answers too, but of course I think the momentum is there because these cables worth a lot. So if the funding is here and that one cable can work, the long cable can work 600, 700 million USD, and now sometimes Southeast Asia can also take benefits from the decoupling, right? So I know that US is laying more cables to evade South China Sea, right? To have a more direct connection from Indonesia, so for example, to go to the Philippines and then straight forward to Guam, rather than going up to closer to the South China Sea. So these type of, I think, political impetus sometimes brings money as well, brings funding, and so ideas like shipbuilding industry, because trying to cover the need for more repair ships, should be there, right? On your question on Indonesia's specific mechanisms, because for a long time we just lay cables, and of course a lot of the ministries that was involved have its own portion of responsibilities when it comes to the process of from applying for license and locating where the corridors are, securing the cables where they lay cables, and then of course the activity of the laying cables itself. It's getting more centralized now because of the I think one of the impetus is 2019 guidelines that we have with ASEAN. So we have around 2021, 2022 a more centralized system. We have the e-pipa cable. So that's electronic pipe and cable system website. They're trying to centralize the system so you can apply more easily and follow the phases. So telecommunication companies can actually follow the phases of where their proposals are when it comes to laying new cables, right? The issue is that we haven't gotten into repair, centralized repair system, and centralized a more surveillance system. So I think this is the homework that can be done. It's still new. The initiative is still new, so there's still a long time. More years to come to really cover the other sides.
So thanks, Chiu Ping, for your suggestion. It's a great idea, but I think that it will take time, right? So in the meantime, maybe I think countries can utilize some existing platform for maritime domain awareness to support their response. For example, the EU has a platform called Indo-Pacific Regional Information Sharing. So with that, users from different countries, can assist in identify where the repair vessel is, and then coordinate between different agencies there, and also that can also help with detect, because do you think that once there is some damage, it's actually quite difficult to locate where the exact location of the damage is. So maritime domain awareness can assist in identify the location and then coordinate it with the repair vessel for faster response.
Your suggestion of investing in cable repair ships, I think the US has a program in that regard. I'm not sure if it's terribly successful so far, but there are attempts to do something like that. And the availability of ships is a big issue, because I remember the cables to Matsu when they were broken. It took about 2 months to get a ship. And once the ship was there, the repair was 10 days. But the big delay was to get a ship somewhere. I'm going to take another question. Please ask one question.
Thank you. I will ask one, but plus one quick question. So, good afternoon. I'm Eric from YCAPS. Many thanks to the panel for the insights. My first question is with regard to institutional mechanisms that exist within ASEAN to protect subsea cables from threats. I understand that even at the country level, there are challenges already. Subsea cables have different agencies in charge of them. It can be Media and Infocom Authority or other authorities such as Fisheries Authorities. And on this point, I totally agree with Big and Sue's recommendation of interagency coordination and focal points so that a coordinated response can be put up. At the ASEAN level, there is only the working group on submarine cables to facilitate regular exchanges that was set up very recently in 2024. Given that many subsea cables cut across the South China Sea, and we have already discussed the associated multiple problems, including disputed waters, 10-dash lines, difficulty in locating the high seas in the South China Sea, there surely must be more discussions within ASEAN to talk about the securitization of subsea cables. So I totally agree with Wafa's recommendation on a forum. So my first question to the panel is this: where should these discussions actually fall under, given the cross-pillar cooperation needed between ASEAN Political Security Community and the ASEAN Economic Community? Should it be under the regional forum, ASEAN Regional Forum, ASEAN Defense Ministers Forum, or would there be scope to create a new forum given the multiple agencies and ministries involved? The second very quick question is more addressed to Sue, given your legal background and writes on Dr. Ho's comments on countries doing more. Would flagging the cables, similar to flagging merchant ships at sea, be useful in allowing the flag state to have jurisdiction to protect the cable? Last point, to add on to Big's suggestion about MDA. Actually, there are existing MDA centers already in this region, such as the IFC in Singapore, and it would be interesting to extend it to the underwater domain and allow the international license officers there to look at a more operational level how to facilitate and protect subsea cables. Thank you.
Shall we start, Sue, with the question which is addressed to you?
Thank you for the question. So I think to respond to the first comment that at the ASEAN level, which, so it has to cut across, I would say, all the pillars at the ASEAN level. So there was a discussion always with the experts like Professor that sometimes even in ASEAN, the subsea cables is under the, I think, economic pillars, but the security and economy not really cooperating or, talking and working together. So I have suggestions regarding this, the working group that they recently formed. So they are currently updating the 2019 ASEAN guidelines on cable repairs. And I would like to suggest that maybe if we could further strengthen this this working group, looking at the examples for what EU has done recently. They had this joint communication to strengthen security and resilience of submarine cables. So their main purpose is for whole resilience cycle approach. So to ensure preventing, detecting, responding, recover, and deterrence. So that's very good initiative that ASEAN can learn from them. And also flagging the cables. I would say it would be quite challenging. You know why? Because cables are not owned by states. So different companies, private companies, and sometimes one single cable is owned by a consortium of different companies based in different countries around the world. So I think that will be challenging, but it is also there are some possibilities to come up with proper regulations to strengthen the international legal framework. But maybe we could discuss more later on. Yes, thank you.
On the question on where this coordination forum should be, we've got abundance of mechanisms. Ideally, it should be ASEAN Maritime Forum, which is a cross-pillar. But again, it's not really working well. I can imagine that they will only release magazines, right? ASEAN Maritime Outlook, they did release. Then maybe ASEAN Cable Outlook is probably the one that they will do. ARF is no, because it's too big. The member states. What I'm thinking of potentially something under. So for example, ASEAN Secretariat is an infrastructure unit to just to flag at the very least, just to flag the leaders, or just to flag the different ministerial meetings, the digital ministers, the AMM. In the case of potential, truly disastrous cable damages that cuts off islands, for example. Another thing would be a potential, if you can frame it as a digital disaster, it could be also put under AHA unit, just as a monitor as well. So that would be one of the units that at the moment I see can be more. But yes, of course, ideally there should be a different one, ideally. So ASEAN Coast Guard Forum is quite new. When I think I remember 10 years ago, the problem was that, not every ASEAN countries have Coast Guards, right? But they did manage to do it, ASEAN Coast Guard Forum. So right now, not everyone has a national team or focal point for cable repair, but I think we can still do it, that type of forum. Ideally that's a new coordinating body.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Instead of having a kind of a separate unit for subsea cable, another approach is to have existing mechanism to address different aspects of subsea cable protections. For example, under the ASEAN Defense Minister Meeting Plus, ADMM Plus, there are already 7 expert working groups already, one on maritime security and another one on cyber security. So maybe the one on maritime security can try to prevent physical damage to subsea cables, and then the working group on cyber security can work on prevent cyber attacks on subsea cable as well.
Thank you very much. I go for the next question. Try my luck again and see if somebody can ask one question, and you could also say to whom it is addressed. Under the light, there's Saleh. Is that it?
Thank you very much. Yes, Ashura here. Thank you very much to the panel for your discussion. I do have a thematic question. It's a single theme, but it addresses several angles. Feel free to address it as how you would wish. My understanding coming in is that the protection of undersea cables is a fairly novel conversation to us here in the region. And so by default, that does mean that there are certain knowledge gaps that we have yet to fill. So what do you feel are the existing gaps in the region that we do encounter when enforcing the protection of regional subsea cables? You might be looking into interagency coordination gaps in regulatory frameworks, the lack of real-time incident reporting, maybe known high-risk sites at sea. But more importantly, do you believe that the relevant regulatory and enforcement agencies in the region are sufficiently socialized to the information out there in order to convince them that more routine subsea cable protection patrols, for example, need to take place? And what can we do to socialize that information to these agencies? And how do we close this knowledge gap? Thank you.
It goes a bit with the sense of urgency which Wafa brought up, I believe. Would you like to add on this, Wafa? Would you like to develop your thoughts from before?
Sure. So, as been discussed, some of the more direct hybrid threat of cable cutting risk is not here yet in the region, at least not widely reported. And of course, the reference object for concerns on subsea cable usually the future, right? The potential for Indonesia, Philippines, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, and other countries, Southeast Asian countries, digital economy by 2030, 2040, 2045, 2050, 2060. How to realize this is by, ensuring connectivity, ensuring that geopolitics doesn't touch this area, ensuring that this type of technical infrastructure is not, impacted by the spillover of geopolitical tensions, and then we can still choose different types of technologies, right? So, but by that fact alone, I think in the case of countries like Indonesia, where there's some national visions of golden Indonesia 2045, or other countries must have certain national medium-term, long-term target. Usually there's a big, awareness of that digital economy is going to be the next big thing. We're not going to be relying on traditional economies anymore, and then this is one of the areas that is still left to explore, and for Southeast Asian countries to better integrate with the global economy and supply chain, right? So by that fact alone, I think it should be a good, entry point to socialize to different ministries, be it digital ministers or others, the Minister of Transport. Because if it's framed as a national concern, as something that would impede your country from achieving X amount of growth by 2030, 2040, it should be a national priority.
Right. Isaac, please.
Thank you so much. I have a fairly simple question. So how can the discourse on subsea cable security be elevated from a niche technical concern to a more mainstream national concern priority for governments, perhaps ensuring adequate resource allocation and interagency coordination for their protection? Thank you.
You'd like to try to take that one, Vic?
Yes, so I just want to echo Sue's recommendation earlier that each country should, put in, subsea cables into their national policy. So in case of Vietnam, Vietnam in 2022 issued a national cybersecurity strategy in which it has the the goal to lay additional subsea cables. So recognize the importance of the cables and the need for digital economy. So I think in terms of framing the subsea cable more in terms of security, like what Eric said earlier, then they can mobilize the Navy and the Coast Guard as well.
Johannes?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My question is actually, remember there was a cable like attempts to severe and actually successful attempt to severe cables in the Baltic area. Belong to Estonia and also Norway, I believe, and also Sweden. And even though everybody believes that they know the culprit, which is like Chinese-owned vessels and led by Russian captains, but as far as I know, until now there's no arrest at all. Or nobody ever brought to trial. And we are talking about Europe, where you already have like really, really good communication among the law enforcement officials with and then we already good investigation and things like that. So how is it that ASEAN can actually achieve that kind of like able to safeguard the cables, even though like European like that, they still get away with it. Like how about ASEAN? Like what's the coordination? Like who's going to take over the investigation, whatever? I think that's the thing that I really want to hear actually from all three. In this session. Thank you.
It's a question of what the coastal states can do, and most often the question is what happens beyond 12 nautical miles. You want to take the first shot, Sue?
Thank you. That's a very great question that I would like to address as well. So as I mentioned earlier in my introduction, that there is a gap in the legal framework, and also we have very limited power to exercise our enforcement jurisdiction, particularly beyond 12 nautical miles territorial sea. So what happened to Baltic Sea incidents? There are a series of incidents happened, and I would say there have been some kind of improvements, or now there is an appetite among states to take actions that, look, these cables are really critical for us, and any damage to the cable, of course not proven yet, but all the boarding and then also arrests all happened based on the suspicions. They are suspected of damaging the cable. So they took action. So previously, maybe like, oh, we have limited jurisdictions, we can't do anything, right? We can't board the vessel, we can arrest the vessel. But there have been incidents that they try to board the vessel and then bring them to the territorial sea. Of course, one case was released after the investigations. Then they believed that it was not intentional damage. Then they released. And another vessel was boarded in the Yipeng 3 in particular, was boarded in the exclusive economic zone. Of course, the flag state gave the permission as well. So from the legal point of view, that's a significant improvement that states are at least now doing something despite limitations according to the law, the existing legal framework. So that's what's happened in Europe, and how about ASEAN? So we always talk about looking at best practices, what others are doing, and is there anything that we can adopt in our own context? So there is no perfect system and no perfect effort, in fact, especially dealing with emerging security threats today, that we just have to try our best to be well equipped to face the challenges. So for ASEAN, first we have to realize, we have to sensitize that it is important to protect the cables. So cables are critical infrastructures, and we need the political will to have the necessary legal and enforcement mechanisms. Despite the gap in the legal framework, if we could do something at the regional level, given the importance of these critical infrastructures to our regions and to all our member states, then we can do something about it. Thank you.
Maybe I can add here quickly, because I think that fits very much your question. The two different cases in Taiwan, the one at the very beginning of January, and there was a second one at the late February. They were both in Taiwan's territorial waters. I'm leaving away the case if Taiwan is a state or not. Within 12 nautical miles from the Taiwanese coast. The first one, the Coast Guard went out, they went to the ship was still within the 12 nautical miles. The seas were high, they couldn't board it, so over radio they interrogated the captain, and at some point they basically let the ship go. Because the standard operating procedures were not clear, what should they do with that ship, and then the Taiwanese authorities said, they're going to Busan, we're going to call our colleagues in Busan. Nobody ever heard anything about that anymore. The second case was to the west side of Taiwan, between Taiwan and Penghu. It was also within Taiwanese territorial waters. They already had, there was a ship which was on the Taiwanese blacklist, so they already were monitoring the ship. Then the cable broke. The Coast Guard went out immediately. They could also not board because the seas were too high, but they escorted the ship back into port. They arrested the captain, and the captain is now being tried. The captain is a Chinese national. The ship was sailing under, I think, Togon flag, some flag of convenience, which showed very clearly that the operating procedures, how Taiwan responds to this, and the telecom provider alarms the Coast Guard goes out immediately. The Navy is in the second row, mostly providing surveillance, because they have the drones and the aircrafts which the Coast Guard don't. And this is all set out now. These two cases show very clearly how much of a difference it can make. Now it's going to be interesting, will they actually be able to prove that to the captain and to what's going to be the charges have been laid, so now it's with the judges, and we'll see the outcome. It's going to be very interesting how it happens. But it shows once you set up your rules, at least within your 12 nautical miles, and where is it the easiest to break a cable is where it's shallow, and that's usually close to land. So that's a place where you can do a lot. Vic or Wafa, you want to add something on, or shall I take another question?
Just a bit, right? So, just following discussion, so legal framework dictates that the responsibility is with the flag state, right? And so, like what Patrick says, the issue is that these vessels use flags of convenience. So it's hard to pinpoint the responsibility, and truly investigate. But I'd just like to pinpoint further, capacity gap, right? So for the ships that is on the surface, how, for example, Taiwan has a blacklist of ships, right? Of course, they usually detect this by suspicious activities, right? Ships that doesn't want to be found, dark vessels, right? With strange patterns of movement. If you gather in together, you find a bit less of ships that you can find suspicious. So that's on the surface. But the problem is the one that operates directly underwater, right? This is something that a lot of think tankers who are working on the issue is worried about with news of China having cable cutting technology able to operate at 4,000 meters depth. They have a potential operational space station underwater that can host up to 4 or 5 people and be there 5 months. So the issue for Southeast Asian countries is that you're right at pinpointing it, is our ability to know and detect, right? Right now, we were still forced by to respond after the cable damage. If we can up our capacity to really detect, and if one of the bilaterals can actually build programs for this, I'm sure countries who are more hesitant to join unilateral programs would be interested, right? If the Quad can actually come from 4 programs on this issue, that would be really great for countries like Southeast Asia.
Right. Taufan, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you all the speakers for the presentation. I just have one question on the prospect of the investment on this particular area, especially between the government or state and financial institution, for instance, like the Asian Development Bank or World Bank. I don't know whether they have the program, for instance, with respect to the maritime activities, including the subsea cables. Seek your comment or elaboration on that. Thank you.
Is anybody aware of any programs in that field? So you're looking for financial institutions, multilateral financial institutions, ADB, World Banks, as such, or?
Yeah, there is what I imagine there are 2 possibilities through the national or state, between national and the institution itself, or regional and the institution itself. Whether is it prospective according to your view, or is it something that's not really feasible or not that urgent? Thank you.
I think, in my opinion, I think a lot of the fundings, I don't think there's a problem. So I don't think because a lot of the cables are owned by multiple companies, and a lot of these companies are really big technology companies like Meta and Google. So from my point of view, funding isn't exactly the big issue, or that so much that states that wants to have a cable of their own must resort to financial institutions or banking, regional banks, because the opportunities are there, and the fundings will be offered to you, especially if your geographic position is crucial for wherever the cables are and connecting the market states with the raw material states or energy states, right? The issue that I'll probably highlight is the geopolitization of ownerships, right? I think it's in 2022 where there's a Chinese consortium that left CME 6 because the Americans were insisting that the suppliers of the cable, the cable is still planned, right? It's not operational yet. Must come from Subcom, must come from American economies. It cannot come from H&M, the Huawei Marine. It cannot come from them. And so the Americans are really hassling for the supplies to come from them. And so the Chinese left. The Chinese financing consortium left. And they worth about 20% of the whole project of the 600, 700 million USD. So that's the issue, the geopolitization of, because of the sensitivity of great power rivalry. And so the funding opportunities gets a bit limited and restricted.
Hi, I just want to add another example. So I think that depends on the market, where's the subsea cables funded. Because, if a country has big enough market, for example, then probably private company will willing to land a cable there. But in other cases, for example, in Timor-Leste, the population, is not big enough. So what I understand is that the first 2 subsea cable going to Timor-Leste actually funded by the Australian government. So it depends on each country's circumstances.
Yeah, you have the same situation in the Pacific Islands, where very small populations, very big distances, which make cable systems extremely expensive, and that's where they come in. I want to dig on one point you all touched upon a bit. We have this sort of deep coupling going on in cable systems in the area. So there seems to be developing a Chinese-owned operated system and a more, shall I say, non-Chinese Western operated system. Now, you can look at this in 2 ways. One way would be, okay, we don't want to depend on a system which is operated by the Chinese. You could also argue, well, it's actually a good thing to have the Chinese on board, because why should the Chinese cut
a cable which is owned by Chinese. What you see on balance, is it a good thing that we're sort of seeing now two different systems, or would it be better to try in the good old liberal economic times, engage, get everybody on board? Because, yeah, if the cable goes from here to Japan, but it also goes to China, why should China cut it? Anybody has any thoughts on this?
I think from the perspective of countries like Indonesia, that's the ideal world, right? It would be a good thing to have the Chinese on board, and as many nationals and multinational companies came in and owned the cable project, and so that when it's inclusive, everyone has a stake on it. It's less likely to have a naughty country sponsoring or cable cuts or any of this risk. The issue is like I've said. I think we're entering a period where there's so many suspicion of the technology of others, right? I think I remember a week ago there was an inquiry or a report on the solar panels from China being reported as having some sort of radio communication device, right? So even in the most technical technologies, you still have suspicion. Of course, China is not doing a good job of alleviating those suspicions, right? Be it balloons or anything else, they haven't done a good job in alleviating the suspicions of others. That's the problem, and of course that would increase the anxiety of countries like the US who were directly competing.
If you want to add something, Vietnam is also a country which is really having it's a very difficult situation to find the balance between these two superpowers. For Vietnam, how does the situation look?
Yeah, I think, like Wafa is right, that there's the economic benefits of having more choices. So, countries can go with the more regional price, for example. But also, yes, he said agree on the suspicion. So for Vietnam, it's the same situation. Yeah, so Vietnam would like to partner with countries that, can help Vietnam to increase the resilience, but also concerned about the security aspect as well.
Okay, I'm going to take another question. Xu Yin, sorry for butchering your name. Please go ahead.
I have a question for the panelists. We see that the undersea cables in the South China Sea are no longer just technical infrastructures. It has becoming a sort of geopolitical assets. So in your opinions, how should we interpret the recent efforts by regional states to reroute, control, or survey these cables, or are we witnessing the weaponization of digital connectivity? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm from legal background, so I would say maybe my fellow panelists can add on. But I would say just now, even the question from just now that, balancing power and two big powers, like taking sides and all, whom to rely on. I would say that it is better for us for the long-term solutions that it's very important just to strengthen ourselves, the capability in terms of legal and also investment in this sector in terms of surveillance. And also these cables in the South China Sea, and there have been reports that not only in the South China Sea, but around the world, some of the even scholars are writing that some of the countries, I won't name them, but they say that especially the superpowers are in fact hacking the cables. It's just that we don't know. So things are happening and nobody is going to say that, oh yeah, we are hacking the cables, we are tapping the cables. They will not say that. So, and from the legal point of view, in order to ensure accountability, attribution is very difficult if we are talking about this cyber security and surveillance. So the best solution for us at the moment is that to be well equipped with the technology that we can have to protect the infrastructures that are connected to us, which is important to us. Let's see what practical steps that can be taken at the moment. Thank you.
There's a question here. I can't read your name, Tiger. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have the question, but would like to share the view from the fishery side that refer to the damage of cable possible by fishing operation. My personal view is trawl fishing gear and other fishing gear that operate at the sea bottom is potential to be the fishing gear that damage this cable. And nowadays, Department of Fishery or national agency request or have regulation for fishermen to install VMS, vessel monitoring system, or AIS, in order to monitor fishing operation. We can make use the information as the hotspot of the fishing ground area that fishing operation and provide to the cable company in order to reduce risks of the cable damage. That is my idea. Thank you.
Thank you, because fishing is the reason number one up to now for cable breaks. So it is a very important topic. I think we have two more questions over here. We go, yes, please.
Hinder from Cambodian Center for Regional Studies. I thank you all panelists for interesting discussion. I have actually one question, but three parts. So the first one is I would like to know from all speakers, should there be sabotages of the subsea cable in ASEAN tomorrow? Based on the existing regional framework, in your view, would that be enough to respond rapidly to this potential sabotage? That's my first part. The second part, Article 113 of UNCLOS mentioned a little bit on how to safeguard and protection of subsea cable, especially to sue. Should, in your view, would it be possible and should ASEAN develop more procedure or like some sort of regional conventions to lay out the detail and guideline on way to safeguard and protection of subsea cable? And the third part to which so far based on the existing procedure beyond the territorial water of ASEAN country, how ASEAN state so far, do they patrol the subsea cable like the case you mentioned beyond their territorial water, since the cable owned by, my understanding is owned by private company, not state owned at all. So these are my questions. Thank you.
I think we're going to keep that your first question for the very end. I think that's a perfect question to wrap up. What would happen if we had a sabotage tomorrow? Let's look at the other questions first. There was one beyond 12 nautical miles. Who wants to look at? Is there any patrolling outside 12 nautical miles?
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I think if I understand correctly, you talk about 113, would it be sufficient, right? So in fact, 113 alone is also not sufficient, because even if we have already criminalized damage to the cables when we, for the enforcement jurisdiction wise, we can only take action if the flag states, if the cable which damage or sabotage the cable is flying our flag, yeah? And the next is for the nationals, which, for example, what Hong Kong did, for example. Hong Kong arrested the captain of the vessel, which was suspected of damaging the cable because the ship was flying the flag of Hong Kong. So the captain is a Chinese national, and he is now in custody awaiting for the trial. So that's one of the examples. That is how Article 113 applied, right? So it's better than nothing, but it's not sufficient. And the next is whether should we have ASEAN level, some sort of binding cooperation mechanisms. Yes, that is the recommendation. So what can we include there? For example, we can have mutual legal assistance and also joint patrol and surveillance and information sharing mechanisms. So we list down all these key points that the countries can cooperate from the prevention until the ensuring accountability that those who damage the cable being taken actions. So I think that is very viable options as well if the states have willing to do that. Thank you.
Before we do that wrap-up question, Rahman, you want to squeeze in a short question, or you're okay?
Short question. The middle power, external power, they have interest in the security of subsea cables in ASEAN, Southeast Asia. So do you see them playing a contributing role to the security of subsea cable in the region? How comfortable ASEAN states will be? Thank you.
Middle power from outside ASEAN, yeah?
Yes, Australia, Japan, for example.
Big, do you want to go with that one? You can. Oh.
No. Okay, good. So I think it's still difficult to see that, especially if we're expecting an external power, even a middle power, a great power, playing a role in helping countries to better observe or better surveil, or even to sense the repair ship of their own, unless it's in the where they have rights, right? So it's still difficult. For example, if we imagine the territorial waters, if it's in the EEZ, if it's in the sea lanes of navigation, I think it's still doable and worth exploring. The one point that would be emphasized by, I think, a lot of ASEAN countries would be due regards, right? So that for these activities, for the help to actually come through the national governments, the littoral states, that if they do it themselves without giving due regards and notification, it's going to be rather difficult, and it would invoke national sentiments that is not really productive for repairs and all.
You want to add on that? Yes.
Yes. I just want to add on, what Australia and Japan have done. Because subsea cable is because it's underwater, so it can actually be included in maritime security. And under the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness, Japan and Australia have contributed to that initiative. So I'm not sure whether they have explicitly mentioned subsea cables, but one easy thing they can do is just add that topic under the initiative.
And your thoughts on if we had a sabotage on subsea cables tomorrow in ASEAN, could ASEAN mount a meaningful response? What are your thoughts on that question?
So I think that, if we can have concrete evidence that is actually a sabotage act and can identify the actor who did that, then I think at least, the coastal state can issue some statement to condemn that activities. And for ASEAN, because we talk about the working group on subsea cables, so I hope that they can come together and have a joint statement on that as well. But beyond that, in terms of concrete action, it will be difficult because what can they do in terms of action, right? That will be a long discussion.
So you see the response mostly on the diplomatic side.
Diplomatic first.
Wafa, you see any on the concrete side? Coast Guards going out, arresting a ship, or?
Yeah, I think in terms of response, yes. Rapidly, no, right? So response is going to be there. The rapid part is the questionable part. So for now, usually telecommunication companies are the ones that reports disruptions, and then the response came after. but you can sort of some of the preemptive observations can be done, like what Vic says, with strange behavior of ships, and then if there's enough evidence of these strange behaviors, you can sort of prosecute within the national boundaries of each nationals. The other thing that I'd like to emphasize, my last point would be, the response is the responsibility of nationals and you know, as a regional initiative. But I'd like to also propose that while it's early, if we can secure and lock in the commitment of countries like China at the East Asia Summit. I've talked about this with Patrick, I think last night. If we can have an East Asia Summit statement that really explicitly affirm the status of submarine cables as critical infrastructure and non-targetable public goods. So locked in the diplomatic commitment at the leaders level, so that we can have at least that document, and that we will have less chance of the weaponization of access to repair some of these cables. That would be really great, and I think it's still early, and we can still do that, you know, initiative.
Sue, you have the last word.
Thank you. Right, so I just want to emphasize again, I want to give these 2 words to remember as a take-home message. First, let's sensitize about these cables, the importance of cables, and they are critical national infrastructures, followed by the appetite to add to protect these cables by having national law, and also proper point of contact is also very important. And just very quickly, that in fact Ashura asked earlier, that it's very important that our law enforcement officers are aware of and familiar with these issues. Is very important, because normally they are the one who go out to the sea and arrest the culprit, right? So they have to be aware of how important these cables are. And in order to enforce the law, they have to aware of what law do we have, right? And what kind of jurisdictions that we can exercise in which areas, which maritime zones. So that's very important. So let's sensitize about this issue with the appetite to protect them. Thank you.
I'd be very curious what kind of discussion we would have in a year or 2 here. Will we have a whole list of sabotage which has taken place, or do we have a whole list of actions which have been taken? It's definitely a topic which will stay on the agenda. Thank you very much, everybody, also for creatively ignoring my request for asking only 1 question. You did all a very good job on that one. And thank you very much for this panel. Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers, and to our speakers, please stay on stage as we are about to have our photo session. Thank you. Once again, let's give them a round of applause. And with that, we will be having a 15-minute break. You can have your coffee break outside and be back at 3:35 p.m. for our last session. Thank you. Test mic. Sirs and ma'ams, we would like to remind everyone to please proceed inside the hall as we are about to begin our final discussion for this afternoon. Thank you. Test mic 1. Sirs and ma'ams, requesting everyone to be inside the hall already as we are about to start our last discussion. Thank you. All right. Once again, good afternoon, sirs and ma'ams. We now arrive at our final panel for today, and I know everyone is excited to go home since it's Friday, and yeah, the traffic here in Manila, Philippines is tragic. All right, and now for chairing this panel is Dr. Raman Yacob, Research Fellow at the Lowy Institute. Joining him are Rear Admiral Samuel Cohas, Executive Secretary, Indonesia Coast Guard, Bakamla, Commodore J. Tariela, Chief West Philippine Sea Transparency Group from the Philippine Coast Guard, and Lieutenant Colonel Nguyen Vuon Nguyen, Deputy Commander, Reconnaissance Unit No. 1, Vietnam Coast Guard. Let's give them a round of applause.
And welcome everyone. Welcome, sirs and madam, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I think it is my honor today to welcome you to today's distinguished panel discussion featuring senior leaders from the Coast Guard of Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam's Defense Ministry. Representing three vital maritime nations in Southeast Asia, I believe these panelists will bring with them deep expertise or personal insight to regional security and cooperation at sea. I think before I proceed further, I would also like to thank Dr. Jeffrey or Daniel and the organizer for intelligently putting the Coast Guard in the last panel. I think it's the most exciting and colorful, given what happened yesterday in the Philippine Sea between the Chinese Coast Guard and the Philippines vessels. Yeah. So going forward, the Coast Guard in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, play a critical role in the security and safety of regional waters. They cooperate closely. They also cooperate closely with the Chinese Coast Guard. Sometimes the physical cooperation is too much. Sometimes it's too wet for some Coast Guard. And of course, they have been damaged during that interaction. But going forward, we look forward to a rich and engaging dialogue on Southeast Asian maritime domains. And I would like to start first at the strategic level. Yeah. I think the first questions that I would like to ask individual panelists is this. What is the most important strategic issue that your Coast Guard is facing currently? So maybe we'll start with Pak Kuas first, then we proceed to the Vietnamese panelists. Yeah, Pak first.
Thank you, Pak Raman. Very good afternoon to you all. First and foremost, I would like to thank the host, in this case, WPS, and the Philippine Coast Guard for inviting us, and let me be the one of the speaker among this prominent audience today. I know that not just me, but the three of us maybe are standing between you and your flight home, and I know that some of you are lawyers, so I will try to be concise with my statement. I think what is the most strategic thing that have to be faced by not just Indonesia and not just the Indonesian Coast Guard, but the Coast Guard, the Navy, and the Maritime Law Enforcement Agency in Indonesia and in this region is actually quite the same, that we have to deal with a lot of problems from the level of petty crimes to things that can actually start war if we cannot manage it with the right approach. In this case, back home, Indonesian Coast Guard, in this case Bakamla RI, we tried to strengthen our organization, our institution, the regulation as well, the national regulation, not just applicable to the Coast Guard itself, but to the maritime security as a whole. And we also try to strengthen the integration, the cooperation between our institution, not just in Indonesia, but also among other Coast Guard, including the maritime law enforcement agencies, especially in the region, in this case, ASEAN. I think that's the thing that you have.
Thank you, Pa. And for Colonel Khan, what is from your positions, what do you see is the most strategic challenge that the Vietnamese Coast Guard is facing now?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. First, I would like to convey my thanks to the WPS for inviting me to join the very important dialogue. And the theme of the dialogue, I think, is very practical, and also we can, together to sit here to talk about the very important issue that is maritime security, which is very important for Southeast Asian countries, and also for Vietnam, because we have 3,200 kilometers border, the Coast Guard, the coast law line. So the Coast Guard is very important for Vietnam to protect the sovereignty, sovereign rights, and also jurisdiction. And if we compare the Coast Guard with other forces in the VPA, the Coast Guard is one among the youngest forces. It was established in 1998, and now maybe if you compare the Coast Guard, the Vietnam Coast Guard, with the other countries in ASEAN, maybe we lack a lot of experience. So we have to. It's a good chance for Vietnam, to cooperate with the ASEAN, Coast Guard, to learn from you, and also to build our capability. And for the mission and task of the Vietnam Coast Guard is to, you see that we have 4 layers to protect the sea. The first one is inland and coast. We have the force to protect the inland and coast. And for the territorial water, that is 12 nautical miles, that is the task of the border guard. And near the border guard is the Coast Guard. And from the Coast Guard is the Navy. So that means we have four forces combined together to protect the sea. So the mission of the Coast Guard in Vietnam is to protect the sovereignty, the sovereign right and jurisdiction, and also combating, against the criminals like the drug trafficking, human trafficking, and also protect the fishermen, and at sea, and to protect the production activities at sea in Vietnam. So, in summary, that the Coast Guard is very, very important for us.
Thank you. And now I'm moving towards to Commodore J. So I think Philippines is a bit unique because of what it is facing now. So correct me if I'm wrong. I think the strategic challenge that the Philippines Coast Guard is facing is disinformation campaign against Philippines' interests. Do you think that is true?
Thank you, Ryan. Before I respond to the question about the strategic challenges that the Philippine Coast Guard is currently facing, I think it's important for us to start. What are the strategic opportunities that the Philippine Coast Guard is providing our current administration? And I think these strategic opportunities are also pretty much the same with how the Indonesian Coast Guard, Malaysian Coast Guard, and even Vietnam Coast Guard are being utilized by their own government. First of all, Coast Guard organizations in the Southeast Asia, not just for the Philippine Coast Guard, is basically mandated to carry out maritime governance. So this is completely different with that of the armed force, the military or the Philippine Navy. When you speak of maritime governance, these are basically constabulary roles. It is related to maritime safety, marine environmental protection, and even maritime law enforcement. So this is the first strategic opportunity that we provide our own government, and it allows us to collaborate and cooperate with other Coast Guard organizations in different countries in Southeast Asia. We believe that Coast Guard cooperation is pretty much easier because these functions that we perform serve the interests of all nations. For example, in countering illegal fishing, addressing narco trafficking, or even illegal smuggling and human trafficking. This allow, for example, the Philippines and Indonesia and Malaysia to counter piracy as well, for example. So through maritime governance that we are currently performing, there are more possibilities of cooperation. And then the most important that the Coast Guard vessels are performing in the entire South China Sea is that, of course, it de-escalates the tension. We all believe, as Coast Guard personnel, that the White House that we are deploying the South China Sea does not send an escalation signal or a provocative action towards any other state actors, may it be with China or any other claimant states in the South China Sea. So, in responding to your question, what are the strategic challenges that we have right now? Well, first of all, that is the violation of the People's Republic of China in encroaching within our own exclusive economic zone, particularly in the West Philippine Sea. And it's not just their encroachment, but rather it is also worth mentioning about their illegal aggression and even the harassment of the ordinary Filipino fishermen. These are the challenges not the Philippines are just facing, but even Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam are also have to address. And in addition to those aggressive actions of the People's Republic of China in the entire South China Sea, as you said, disinformation is one of our greatest challenges that we face, not just at sea, but even to our domestic level. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore. As a follow-up question, anyway, I think early on in the opening statements for this event, Dr. Daniel actually mentioned we should avoid using technical terms, but he didn't mention that we should avoid tough questions. So I'm going to ask a bit provocative. So you mentioned the West Philippine Sea, but I think to my understanding too that China may be interested to exert dominance in the Luzon Strait, because if it seeks to control or to invade Taiwan successfully, control of the Luzon Strait will be quite important. So in your capacity, have you seen any increased Chinese engagement, presence in that area, and whether the Philippines Coast Guard will strengthen its focus in that area? Thank you.
Well, as you can probably Google through open source, our focus now in Luzon Strait are, of course, the persistent presence of the Chinese research vessel. The Philippine government has never, has never hesitated to publicize all of this. Since the start of the year, we have documented the presence of the Chinese research vessels in Luzon Strait. So right now, for the Philippine Coast Guard, besides from the fact that we are monitoring, documenting, and also driving them away, that is another concern for us in Luzon Strait, because the Chinese research vessels most of the time are conducting illegal marine scientific research within our own exclusive economic zone that is not permitted by the Philippine government.
Thank you very much. So when I look through all the three answers, the word cooperation has been regularly emphasized. And my next question is this: what is the state of ASEAN Coast Guard cooperations now? And do you think how best can the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, for example, be used to be an effective regional forum to address maritime challenges? Maybe I will give one example. I think I understand that there has been a discussion about rules of engagement among the ASEAN Coast Guard. Do you think ASEAN Coast Guard can come to an agreement to engage each other in a peaceful manner, which means we do not water cannon each other, for example, and that would provide a good example to external power engaging us. So maybe I start first with Pak Kuas first.
Thank you, Pak Rahman. I think the evolution of the cooperation between Coast Guard and maritime law enforcement agencies in Southeast Asia, in particular, stand as tangible evidence actually of the effectiveness of the ASEAN principle. Why do I say this? Because the principal challenge actually in establishing the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum lies in the divergent understanding, perspective of the ASEAN member states on maritime security. And this is not an easy task. I think many of us are already aware that even experts like Professor Geoffrey Thiel or Dr. Christian Burger or maybe Ms. Azura over there and Colin, if he's still here, still struggling to find the right definition for maritime security. So in the context of that, the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, when we tried to establish it in 2022, to invite all the head of the ASEAN Coast Guard at the time, we never thought that the pace or the speed of the meeting to find common ground for us would be so quick. Next week, actually, we will have the technical expert group meeting in Bogor, Jakarta. At the moment, the chairman of the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum is the Philippine Coast Guard, but the technical expert group meeting will be done on the 28th of May, and all the 10 delegates from 10 member states of ASEAN will be there as well. And I think it's a very great achievement that all 10 already have the feeling that they need to be there, right? So for me, I'm really optimistic that this is the indicators that show that the ASEAN Coast Guard and the maritime law enforcement agencies in the South Asia, we want to work together. And actually, even while we are trying to finish the term of reference and concept paper, we actually already start doing some activities. For example, we already held regular morning briefs. It's for information sharing between Southeast Asia Coast Guard, ASEAN Coast Guard, and the MLEA, right? And we also already perform joint exercise between ASEAN Coast Guard, and we also send our people, not just the high level, but also the middle level officials in exchange of visit, and the patrol vessel as well. For example, Indonesia already sent our vessels to the Philippines, to Vietnam, to Malaysia, to Singapore, and in turn, the Philippine, the Malaysian Coast Guard vessel already visit Indonesia, and in the very near future, Singapore Police Coast Guard vessel also will visit Indonesia. So the kind of interactions that has been done, even though the ACF is not formally yet established as the technical bodies of ASEAN, but we already done a lot of activities together.
Okay, it looks good, promising, and I think there are some quarters within ASEAN that when they are comparing between the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum and the COC negotiation. The COC negotiation is a bit slow, so there were some quarters that actually suggested the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum could be used as a negotiation point between the different ASEAN Coast Guard forces to find common ground in engaging each other. Do you think that may work? Can the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum work hand in hand or in parallel with the COC negotiation? What do you think from the Vietnamese perspective? Do you think can ASEAN Coast Guard Forum actually come up with a code of conduct within the ASEAN forces themselves?
Yes, I think that for the COC, I think it's a very difficult, the difficult problem. For you know that for the DOC, it takes about 10 years to negotiate, and then the DOC, was born in 2002, and from that we continue the discussing on COC. But I think, for the COC process, we still have some difficulties. First among ASEAN states, about the areas of application, and also about the sovereignties and sovereign rights, and also between the ASEAN member state and also China. And I think that the difference is now too far, from each other. So that if we wish the COC come into effect or come into the result or something like that. But I think it takes time for this, the ASEAN and China to build COC, because we have a lot of difficulties to have to be resolved. Yeah.
So going forward to Commodore J, do you think the Coast Guard, ASEAN Coast Guard Forum actually can be used to find a common ground in terms of how ASEAN Coast Guard engage each other, and using, if there is an agreement, ASEAN then can tell China, look, among ourselves, we have this agreement, so you have to comply with us. Do you think that may work?
This is my wish. This is my wish, That is, the ASEAN Coast Guard should have an agreement first. Because if you want to do something with outside, you must be strong. You must be strong yourself first. Then among ASEAN Coast Guard, we have to unite, with each other, and then by this agreement, cooperation, for example. Yeah.
So, Commodore J, what is your view about that?
Well, first of all, even there is no existing rules of engagement among Coast Guard in Southeast Asia. For example, with that of Bakamla or MMEA or Vietnam Coast Guard, every time the Philippine Coast Guard would pass through in those areas that are occupied by Vietnam Coast Guard, or even with that of the MMEA, we don't usually carry out actions that are unlawful or aggressive. We don't do water cannoning. We don't attempt to ram each other. As ASEAN Coast Guard, I think we have our own understanding that this kind of actions are not something that is acceptable. We know how to respect each other, even if we are passing through contested area in the South China Sea. At the same time, the Philippine Coast Guard also know how to treat fairly and humanely the fishermen from Malaysia, Indonesia, or even Vietnam. In return, your Coast Guards are also doing the same thing to our Filipino fishermen. It's only the People's Republic of China who is conducting harassment and bullying and coming out with the violation of collision regulation and even using water cannon against our vessel. So, in the absence of any existing document that would strengthen the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, I think among Southeast Asians, we know how to behave properly, and we know how to recognize each other as a law enforcement agency. But just to go back to your question, whether the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum can be an agency wherein we can support one another in suppressing Chinese aggressive action. I don't think that among Southeast Asians, particularly during ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, we don't discuss about China threat. In ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, we only talk about the regional interests that talks and concerns about our own functions, whether it's search and rescue or combating IUUF or doing maritime law enforcement. Among other Asian Coast Guards, that is having China as an issue or an agenda in those forums so far has never been that, very popular.
Thank you very much. I'm not going into a specific country, issues that related to your specific country per se. So in the case of Indonesia, there have been reports that actually President Prabowo has reduced the budget allocated to Bakamla from about $66 million to about $44 million. That's quite a lot. So with more than 17,000 islands to secure, how does Bakamla cope with its missions to safeguard Indonesian maritime interests with a limited budget?
Yeah, thank you. For Bakamla, the budget cut is accepted by us as our effort, national effort, right, to focus on more important things. Of course, all of the tasks that must be taken by Coast Guard are important. But what we have done so far is we try to focus on matters that cannot be, for example, delayed, because usually it's not new. You know, this budget cut already been done for the past 5, even more than that. And usually in the middle or middle of the year, then there will be some relaxation. So what we have done is we prioritize the operational aspect of it, of the budget. So it will not jeopardize our maritime law enforcement missions, right? And then we work more with other agencies in Indonesia, and we have the Navy that and other maritime law enforcement agencies that we can work together. We can do, you know, the shift, right? Who's going to be there, and in what period of time. And at the moment, we also, the system is already there, our national surveillance system, but now we rely more on our surveillance and reconnaissance system to back up our operation. And with the information that we got from our fusion center, we will share it to other institutions as well. So I don't think the budget cut affect us so significantly at the moment. Thank you.
Now, going forward to Vietnam, Vietnam is a very interesting case. There was a report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in 2021. It mentioned that Vietnam have begun expanding some of its small and medium-sized outposts in the Spratly Islands. About 2,200 acres of new land has been created across 10 features, 8 new harbors, and 1 new airstrip. I think what's interesting is this. China has not taken a hardline stance against Vietnam, against the Philippines, for example. So, are you able to share your magic formula in dealing with China? How you soften the Chinese?
Thank you. It's a very interesting question. And also, it's the first time I hear about the data from CSIS. I'm not sure. It's first time for me to so I have, maybe I will come back to my home and have time to study again about the data you give, that about 2,200 acres for new land in the Spratly Islands, you mean? I think that, I myself, have been working as in strategic studies, and I have the study tours over, in Spratly Island 3 times. I have been there 3 times. And you know that the weather and climate in the Spratly Island areas is very, very harsh. Due to the climate change, the water level is rising, and also make the land eroded, So that's why our island, the island Vietnam, occupied there is becoming small and small. So that before that, in front to recover that, we have to build the dikes and to be reinforced to prevent the erosion of the land, to protect the people living there, to protect the fishermen over there. Because in the island, in some islands, we have the people living, and also the school for children to study there, and also the pagodas and other things. So that's why we have to protect them, and this is our purpose. But I'm not sure that we can have 2,200 acres of new land.
Yeah, but as a follow-up question,
maybe it takes me a long time to explain for you. Vietnam and China have a very long history we have, lived together with a big neighbor for 4,000 years. And our ancestors also know how to live with the big neighbors. And now the government, the present government also follows our the advices of our ancestors. China is a big country. So don't do something that they feel lose face. And in Vietnamese saying, we also have, don't trouble the trouble till the trouble troubles you. That is, I think that is very important for the policy, the diplomatic policy, how to live with big neighbors. And for Vietnam, we have, in relationship with China, the relationship between Vietnam and China is quite good, I can say. It's quite good, except the South China Sea issue. I mean that in politically, economically, militarily and other things, very good, except the South China Sea. And now we have, we have the party diplomacy, state diplomacy, and people-to-people diplomacy with China. So that's why we promote the whole, diplomacy with China. When something happens, we promote the whole strength of any kinds of types of diplomacy to resolve the problems.
Thank you. Now go to actually your strategic focus and also create dependency. And also, how do you prioritize these engagements? Thank you.
Well, obviously, the Philippines, next to Indonesia, is a very big archipelagic country. This is the reason why we are currently prioritizing acquisition of more Coast Guard vessels, and as you said, thanks to Japan and Australia, since we're going to receive more Coast Guard assets in the next coming years. If the question is, with that increasing tremendously the number of Coast Guard vessels in the next coming years, how can the Philippine Coast Guard strategically man all these assets? I think the Philippine Coast Guard started by increasing the number of personnel even before the assets were delivered. 9 years ago, in 2016, the Philippine Coast Guard only has a manning of 8,900. And we came up with a proposal increasing the Coast Guard to as many as 37,869. This year, the Philippine Coast Guard number of personnel is now 34,000. We are now even bigger than that of the Philippine Navy and Philippine Marines combined. We have prepared our personnel for the coming of the next, in the next year, the Coast Guard vessels coming from Japan and even in France. So I don't think that the demand for the number of competency as well and the number of personnel that we're going to bring on board our Coast Guard assets will be shortened because of these assets in the next coming years. We have strategically managed and had a foresight that this will happen as it, as we have been receiving support from these foreign countries.
Before I open to the floor to raise the questions, I would like to ask the last questions. I will start with Commodore J first. Looking at the future of the Philippines Coast Guard, what is your visions for the future for the Philippines Coast Guard? And do you think there is a place for middle powers such as Australia, Japan, and of course EU? Can they play a role or contribute to your vision?
Well, as a Coast Guard officer, although I'm not the commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard, I know that this question would perfectly fit in for our commandant as how he sees the Coast Guard in the next coming years. But
as a senator also?
But as a Coast Guard personnel, I really envision having a regional Coast Guard in Southeast Asia who are there to push for maritime governance. That it's not just setting aside their differences about their territorial dispute, but we engage one another in support of our own national interests, whether it's in countering piracy or ensuring safe trade routes for those vessels that are passing there, and even promoting safety of life and property at sea and protecting the marine environment. Technically, the Coast Guard function is all about humanitarian and supporting these constabulary roles. We're not actually there to engage in war, be engaged in armed conflict, and be the reason of escalation. So that is how I see the Coast Guard will develop in the next coming years. Regarding your question as to how the United States, the middle powers like Australia, Japan, and even South Korea can support this realization of dream, I think if you're going to look at the Australian Maritime Border Force of Australia and the Coast Guards of South Korea and Japan, they also share the common mandates of the Coast Guard in Southeast Asia, also promoting safety, protecting the marine environment, and enforcing maritime laws. If all these middle powers will support the capability of Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines, and share their own understanding of how international law can be enforced at sea, I think definitely these countries would really support and accelerate my vision of having a Coast Guard that is cooperating in promoting a rules-based order.
Thank you, Commodore. And to my Vietnamese panelists, so beside the magic formula with the Chinese-Vietnamese relations, what is your vision for the Vietnamese Coast Guard in the future?
I think it's a very important issue because, as I said before, we must be strong first. That means the Coast Guard must be strong. And the capability building is very important for every Coast Guard. And of course, we advocate to, to mobilize the domestic issue or domestic resources. But we also need the support from, outside. So for Vietnam, we always advocate the resilience and also strategic autonomy. That means we have to rely first on ourselves, and then we also take advantage of the outside help. This is a very important and very good way for building the Coast Guard. And that especially now we are living in the fourth industrial revolution, and also in the modern times, we also need the expertise, the personal training, and also the equipment, especially the new technology like artificial intelligence in developing the capability or in building the capability of the Coast Guard. And also we always welcome the support and the help or assistance from other countries, including Australia, including the US and India, South Korea and Japan. And also in Vietnam we have the Center for English Training for the sailors, for the officers and soldiers from the Coast Guard. And also we combine the visit for the port call with the foreign vessels to come and also to train the HADR and also the queues, as exercise, for example. And this is, I think, the good way for us to increase our capability.
Thank you. Pak Kwas, just questions regarding the visions for the Bakamla. So do you think the Indonesians' non-alignment, bebas and active, will have an impact on Bakamla visions? Because if you want to receive assistance from the US or major power, whether bebas and active policy, does it have impact on your engagement with foreign partner? And also your vision for Bakamla?
I don't think so.